Hello everyone, and today we are going to start up and continue with the first practice test. And in this video we are going to discuss the second module of practice test 1 from the college board. This is an official test that we are discussing. I've already done with the video on the first module. I hope you guys have watched that. If not, then I would recommend that you go back and watch that video and see how we have done the first practice test and the module 1 of first practice test, and then you can come back to this. This is the second module of first practice test. Let's go on with this. As you all know, the first part is always of craft and structure. So the first part that we have is from words in context. Let's move on with it. It says, for painter Jacob Lawrence, being blank was an important part of the artistic process because he paid close attention to all the details. So he was paying close attention. So he had to do with details and something like that, right? So detailed working or something that was very precise, something like that. So it cannot be skeptical, it cannot be critical, and it cannot be confident. It has to be observant. So observant means that he was paying attention to all the details and he was going on like that, right? So B would be the best answer over here. Let's move on to question number 2. It says, Monica Lopez Ferrara and others at Brazil's Butantan Institute are studying the freshwater stingray species Potomatrigon rex to determine whether biological characteristics such as the race, age, and sex have blank effect on the toxicity of their venom. That is to see if differences in these traits are associated with considerable variations in venom potency. So the question is, which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? So if you look at it, it says, you have to see whether it has enough impact. So the word is enough, right? So what you have to see is whether it is having enough impact on their consistency, right? So enough, for the word enough, if you look at it, it cannot be disconcerting, it cannot be acceptable, it cannot be imperceptible. It has to be what? It has to be substantial, right? So it has to be substantial, it has to have a substantial impact on it. So the best answer for this question has to be option D. We can go on with it. Let's move on to the next question. Now, as you guys see, for the first few part, we have words in context with a large amount, right? So we have words in context in large quantity in the paper. So it's very important that you guys have a good vocabulary. Having a good vocabulary will automatically give you a leverage to score good on these questions. Especially the first few questions. So if you even have 4 to 5 questions that are related to words in context, it's going to be a big leverage for you guys, right? So let's move on to question number 3. It says, researchers have struggled to pinpoint specific causes for hiccups which happens when a person's diaphragm contracts blank. However, neuroscientist Kimberly with Whitehead has found that these uncontrollable contractions, so you have to say that it has to be the word that you need in the blank has to do something with uncontrollable or something that happens on its own, something that happen on its own. This is what is the right answer, right? So it cannot be beneficially, it cannot be strenuously, and it cannot be smoothly. It has to be involuntarily. It has to be involuntarily. This is the best answer for your question, option A. It's always good to first come up with a word that you think should be the answer in words in context, and then move on to the option. It's always good that you do that. Let's move on to the option of question number 4. It says, critics have asserted that fine art and fashion rarely blank in a world where artists create timeless works for exhibition and designers periodically produce new styles for public to buy. So we don't know whether they really are there or they are not there. We don't know that. But it has to do something with the word meet, right? So what he's trying to say is that critics have asserted that fine art and fashion rarely meet in a world where artists create timeless works for exhibition and designers periodically produce new styles. So they are doing something else and they are doing something else. So it's very hard for them to meet. So if you need a word something like this, it cannot be prevail, it cannot be succumb to something, and it cannot be diverge. It has to be intersect. Intersect is something to do, has something to do with their coming in together. So that cannot be the answer. If you look at the next question, question number 5, it says, scholarly discussions of gender in Shakespeare's comedies have often celebrate often celebrate the rebellion of the playwright's characters against the rigid expectations blank by Elizabethan societies. Most of the comedies end in marriage, with characters returning to their socially dictated gender roles after previously defying them, but there are some notable exceptions. So, that is what they're saying, that everything is going as per the expectations. So, if you look at the sentence again, it says, celebrate the rebellion of the playwright characters against the rigid expectations blank by the society. So you need something that means put forward by the society. So if you're going with something that says put forward by the society, that means it cannot be interjected, it cannot be committed, it cannot be illustrated, it has to be prescribed. Prescribed is a word that goes completely in line with the word put forward, right? So this has to be the better answer. If you move on with it, if you look at question number 6, it says, in studying the use of external stimuli to reduce the itching sensation caused by an allergic histamine response, Louise Ward and colleagues found that while harmless applications of vibration or warming can provide a temporary distractions, such blank stimuli can offer less relief than a stimulus that seems less benign, like mild electric shock. So, if you look at this, you have to go with the word innocuous, because that is the best word that can be suited over here. Deceptive obviously cannot, novel cannot be there, practical cannot be there, because they're talking about something, something that is more effective, right? So that is what innocuous is, and that is why it's going to be your answer. Moving on. Moving on to question number 7. The province of 𝐂𝐭 was situated on the Pacific coast, hundreds of kilometers southeast of Tenochtitlan, the capital of Aztec Empire. Because 𝐂𝐭's location within the empire was so blank, cacao and other trade goods produced there could reach the capital only after a long overland journey. So that means if they had to go through a long overland journey to get to that capital, it means that they were somewhere towards the corner or far away place, something like that. So that is what the best answer could be. It cannot be unobtrusive, it cannot be concealed, it cannot be approximate, it has to be peripheral, right? So peripheral is something that is there towards the boundary, something that is there towards the end. So that is the best answer over here as per the options, right? So let's move on. So question number 8 is again a main purpose question. We are still in the craft and structure. It says the following text from Charlotte Brondt's 1847 novel Jane Eyre. Jane works as a governess at Thornfield Hall. I went on with my day's business tranquilly, but ever and anon vague suggestions kept wandering across my brain of reasons why I should quit Thornfield, and I kept involuntarily framing advertisements and pondering conjectures about new situations. These thoughts I did not think to check; they might germinate and bear fruit if they could. Right. So, if with choice best states the main purpose of the text. So, if you look at it, which choice is giving you the main purpose? If you look at this, it says the first option. It says that to convey a contrast between Jane's outward calmness and internal restlessness. So that is what is going on, internally. First, it went on tranquilly, but again, when you talk about it, how she was thinking and feeling, that was a bit of restlessness. So there is a contrast over there. That is why A can be the best answer. Obviously, other options, they are talking about it, but not in a way that should have been, because when you talk about the main purpose question, you have to talk about all that is there in the passage. So you have to take the central idea, and along with the central idea, you have to take the other things, right? So again, moving on. Now, this is a cross-text connection question. If you look at question number 9, the first text, it says most animals can regenerate. Most animals can regenerate some parts of their body, such as the skin, but when a three-banded panther worm is cut into three pieces, each piece grows into a new worm. Researchers are investigating that this feat partly to learn more about humans' comparatively limited abilities to regenerate, and they are making exciting progress. And especially promising discovery is that both humans and panther worms have a gene for early growth response (EGR) linked to regeneration. So both humans and the panther worm both of them have this gene. Text 2. When Mansi Shrivastava and her team reported that panther worms like humans possess a gene for EGR, it caused excitement. However, as the team pointed out, the gene likely functions very differently in humans than it does in panther worms. Shrivastava has likened EGR to a switch that activates other genes involved in regeneration in panther worms, but how the switch operates in humans remain unclear. So yes, text 1 says that both of them have the same gene, so it was implying that because panther worms can regenerate, humans can also regenerate. But text 2 is telling us that although both of them has it, but they work in different ways. How it works in humans, we don't know that. How it works in panther worms, we know that, but it is going to be different. It is a little different, right? So that is why if you look at the question, it says based on the text, what would the author of text 2 most likely say about text 1's characterization of the discovery involving EGR? So if you look at this question, obviously text 2, the author of text 2 would say that would tell the first author not to be that optimistic, or at least wait before getting making some conclusion, because we don't know how it operates in the humans, right? So it is reasonable given Srivastava and her team have identified how EGR functions in both humans and panther worms. So they have not identified that. It's completely incorrect. It is overly optimistic giving additional observations from Srivastava and her team. Yes, it is overly optimistic because we don't know and we don't have any idea about how it works in humans. So it cannot be option B. It is unexpected given that Srivastava and her team's findings were generally met with enthusiasm. No, it is unfairly dismissive. Again, it's not unfairly dismissive. It is dismissive, but it's not unfairly dismissive because they have obviously found a reason to dismiss it, right? So it cannot be D and it cannot be C. The best answer over here is going to be option B. Now let's move on to the next question, question 10. Question 10 is, it says the following text is adapted from William Shakespeare's 1609 poem Sonnet 27. The poem is addressed to a close friend as if he were physically present. Weary with toil, I hurry to my bed. The dear repose for limbs with travel tired. But then begins a journey in my head to work my wine when my body is expired. For then my thoughts far where I abide begin a zealous pilgrimage to thee and keep my drooping eyelids open. So what is the main idea of the text? When you talk about the main idea of the text, you need all the information of the passage. You have to be very careful about not taking into account the questions that have any particular part of the passage, or anything that is not talking about the entire passage. So if you look at option A, it says the speaker is asleep and dreaming about traveling to see the friend. So this very well obviously can be the answer, but again, is it actually about the sleep or is it about the thinking? Because it says but then begins a journey in my head, so that means he was implying or he is hinting the fact that he was or she was thinking, right? The speaker is planning an upcoming trip to the friend's house. No, again. The speaker is too fatigued to continue a discussion with the friend. No, the speaker is thinking about the friend instead of immediately falling asleep, right? So he cannot sleep. That is again written very clearly towards the end of the passage, and towards the start of the passage it is written that the journey begins in his head. That is why he is thinking. So the best answer over here is going to be option D. So question number 11 is a poetry based question. If you look at it, it says the following text is adapted from Lewis Carroll's 1889 satirical novels Lie and Bruno. A crowd has gathered outside a room belonging to the warden, an official who reports to Lord Chandler. One man who was more excited than the rest flung his hat high into the air and shouted, as well as I could make out, "Who roared for the sub-warden?" Everybody roared, but whether it was for the sub-warden or not did not clearly appear, but was shouting bread and some taxes, but no one seemed to know what it was that they really wanted. This is not a poetry question, so this is a proper passage. All this I saw from the open window of the warden's breakfast salon, looking across the shoulder of the Lord Chancellor. What can it all mean? He kept repeating to himself. I never heard such shouting before, and at this time of the morning too, with such unanimity. So let's move on to the option. The question is based on the text. How does the Lord Chandler respond to the crowd? Option A, he asks about the meaning of the crowd's shouting. Even though he claims to know what the crowd wants. So he is clearly saying that what can all it mean. So he does not know what does the crowd want. That is what is going on. So this cannot be your answer. He indicates a desire to speak to the crowd, even though the crowd has asked to speak to the sub-warden, right? So he has not indicated that. He expresses sympathy for the crowd demands, and even though the crowd shouting annoys him. Again, we don't see this anywhere. He described the crowd as being united, even though the crowd clearly appears otherwise, right? So he says that the crowd had unanimity, but if you read it, some were talking about the bread and some were talking about the taxes. So obviously, bread, some people who were poor, they were talking about bread, and obviously the people who were rich, they would talk about the taxes. So that would mean that people had diverse, the people were themselves diverse, and their demands were also diverse. So having these diverse demands, even after having these diverse demands, the people were different, and the author was saying that they were same, they were alike. So that is why the best answer over here for this question has to be option D. If you look at the next question, let's move on to it. O Pioneers is a 1913 novel by Willa Cather. In the novel, Cather portrays Alexandra Bergson as having a deep emotional connection to her natural surroundings. Which quotation from O Pioneers most effectively illustrates the claim? So you have to talk about what? Having a deep emotional connection to her natural surroundings. So whichever option talks about the fact that she had a deep natural connection with the natural surrounding will be your answer. So you can move on, and it says she had never known before how much the country meant to her. The chirping of the insects down the long grass had been like the sweetest music. She had felt as if her heart were hiding down there somewhere with the quail and the plover and all the little wild things that crooned or buzzed in the sun. Under the long shaggy ridges, she felt the future stirring. So this is an option that talks about nature. This is all about nature and her connection with it. Most probably this is going to be the answer. We can still read the other options. If you look at option B, it talks about the crop. Option C is talking about how she was driving away, and option D is talking about some of the papers and how, what was the weight and everything. So again, this is different. None of the options are talking about nature, and that is why option A will be the best answer over here. We are going to take this as our answer. Let's move on. The questions are a bit lengthy because this is the second module and it's supposed to be a difficult one. So let's move on. So the second question, question number 13, it is a command of evidence quantitative question. So let's just start with question number 13, which says approximate rates of speech information conveyed for 5 languages. The 5 languages are Serbian, Spanish, Vietnamese, Thai, Hungarian. The table has number 1 rate of speech syllables per second, and then it has rates of information conveyed bits per second. So it has time. So let's read the passage and see what it says. The passage says a group of researchers working in Europe, Asia, and Oceania conducted a study to determine how quickly different Eurasian languages are typically spoken in syllables per second and how much information they can effectively convey in bits per second. They found that although languages vary widely in the speed at which they are spoken, the amount of information languages can effectively convey tends to vary much less. Thus, they claim 2 languages with very different spoken rates can nonetheless convey the same amount of information. So the claim is 2 languages with different spoken rates nonetheless convey the same amount of information in given amount of time. So whether the rates are different, whether the rates are more, they can convey the same amount of information. That is what this question is saying, right? So moving on, if you look at it, which choice describes the data from the table and supports the researcher's claim? Among the 5 languages in the table, Thai and Hungarian have the lowest rates of speech and the lowest information conveyed. So it's not that, and even if it is not going on with the claim. If you look at option B, it says Vietnamese conveys information at approximately the same rate as Spanish despite being spoken at a slower rate. That is what we need, because it says that whether the rates are fast or if they are slower, the information that is being conveyed, that is the same. So if you look at this, it's talking about Vietnamese and the Spanish. So if you look at their rates and the information being conveyed, so Vietnamese is 5.3 syllables per second and Spanish is 7.7 syllables per second. But if you look at the information being conveyed, that is almost the same. It has 42 and it has 42.5 bits per second. So nonetheless, what the speed of conversion of syllables is, the amount of information that is being conveyed, that stays the same. So that is what the author is saying in the passage as well, and that is why we are going to take option D as the answer. You can pause the video and you can look at question D and C as well, but again you won't find it to be the logical answer. The best answer for this question is going to be option B. Let's move on. Psychologists Racha Keltner and Jonathan Hartett have argued that experiencing awe, a sensation of reverence and wonder typically brought on by perceiving something grand or powerful, can enable us to feel more connected to others and thereby inspire us to act more altruistically. Keltner, along with Paul K. Piff and Pierre Detzi and colleagues, claim to have found evidence for this effect in a recent study where participants were asked to either gaze up at exceptionally tall trees in a nearby grove reported to be universally awe-inspiring experience, or stare at the exterior of a nearby nondescript building. After 1 minute, an experimenter deliberately spilled a box of pens nearby. Which finding from the researchers' study, if true, would most strongly support their claim? So first you have to work out what the claim is. Once you find that, then you can answer the question easily. The claim that he's trying to make is that when people look at nature, when people look at trees, they tend to act more altruistically, right? So, and this is what he has claimed as well. So if you look at option A, it says participants who had been looking at trees helped the experimenter pick up significantly more pens than did participants who had been looking at the building. This would support the claim, because this is actually talking about exactly what it has been talked about in the passage, that if people look at things that are related to natures, or nature or trees or something like that, they are supposed to be more altruistic, and that is why they will have help the author as well, right? So A would be the best answer over here. Employment by sector in France and United States, 1800 till 2012, percentage of total employment. So the employment that these two countries have had in different sectors in different time periods, that is what this table is talking about. Let's read what the passage is saying. Over the past 200 years, the percentage of the population employed in the agricultural sector has declined both in France and the United States, while employment in the service sector, which includes jobs in retail, consulting, and real estate, etc., has risen. However, this transition happened at a very different rate in two countries. This can be seen most clearly by comparing the employment by sector in both countries. So, what they're saying is that with time, the employment has decreased in agriculture and it has increased in the service sector, right? So, employment in the agriculture sector has declined for both US and France, and employment in the service sector has risen, right? So you have to focus on agricultural sector and service sector of both the countries, right? But what they're saying is that the rate has declined and increased in both the sectors at different rates, right? So what you can do is you can look at the options. First one is saying that 1900 with the employment by sector in 1950. So if you look at this 1900, if you look at 43 and 32, so it has declined, and 28 and 35 it has increased. So as per the passage, this is happening. If you look at the US, 41 till 14 and 31 till 53, so it's as per the passage. If you look at it, the numbers have decreased in agriculture and increased in service, and over here as well they have decreased in agriculture and increased in services, but like the passage says, that it has happened at a different rate or different pace. So if you look at it, the decrease over here in France is of around 10 points, but over here it is about around somewhat around 30 points, almost 30 points, right? So 27 or 28 points, right? Similarly, the increase over here in France is of about 7 points, whereas over here, if you look at the increase, it's more than 23 or 22 points. So the rate at which it has happened, it is differing, whereas the increase or decrease in both the relevant sectors as per the passage, it is as per the passage, right? So option A, inherently we have checked that it is complying with what the passage is talking about. I don't think there is any need to check the options where although you can do that, you can read all the options, but option A is completely in line with what the passage is saying and what the graph is stating. That is why the best answer for this question is going to be option A. Moving on. Question number 16. Many archaeologists will tell you that categorizing excavated fragments of pottery by style, period, and what objects they belong to relies not only on standard criteria but also on instinct developed over years of practice. In a recent study, however, researchers trained a deep learning computer model on thousands of images of pottery fragments and found that it could categorize them as accurately as a team of expert archaeologists. Some archaeologists have expressed concern that they might be replaced with such computer models, but researchers claim that outcome is highly unlikely. Which finding, if true, would most directly support the researchers' claim? So, what you have to talk about now is what would support the researchers' claim. And to support the researchers' claim, if you look at the first option, it says in researchers' study, the model was able to categorize the pottery fragments much more quickly than the archaeologists could. In the researchers' study, neither the model nor the archaeologists were able to accurately categorize all the pottery fragments that were presented. A survey of archaeologists showed that categorizing pottery fragments limits the amount of time they can dedicate to other important tasks that only human experts can do, right? So, if you look at this, this is exactly what has been talked about in the passage, and this is going to be your best answer for this question. Look at question number 17, moving on. Question number 17, it says, although military veterans make up a small proportion of total population of the United States, they occupy a significantly higher proportion of the jobs in the civilian government. One possible explanation for this disproportionate representation is that military service familiarizes people with certain organizational structures that are also reflected in the civilian government bureaucracy, and this familiarity thus make civilian government jobs especially appealing to military veterans. Yes, this is going to be the case because they have a significantly lower population as a whole, but in the job market of that bureaucracy, they are more there. That is why it's going to be more attractive to the military veterans, and that can be the answer. I'm not saying that this is the answer, but you can read the other options as well. Alters the typical relationship between military service and subsequent career preferences. No. Encourages non-veterans applying for civilian government jobs. Maybe, but again, it has not been talked about. Increases the number of civilian government jobs that require some amount of military experience. Again, no. So the best answer over here, like we talked about it, it's going to be option A. Moving on. Now, if you look at question number 18, birds of many species ingest foods containing carotenoids, pigmented molecules that are converted into feather coloration. Coloration tends to be especially saturated in male birds' feathers, and because carotenoids also confer health benefits, the deeply saturated colors generally serve to communicate with what is known as an honest signal of a bird's overall fitness to potential mates. However, ornithologist Olison J. Schultz and others have found that males in several species of the Tanager genus are microstructures in their feathers to manipulate light, creating the appearance of deeper saturation without the birds necessarily having to maintain carotenoid rich diet. These findings suggest that so basically, what they're saying is that a male function has to be, it is not a completely true identification of what's going on. So if you look at option A, it says individual male teenager can engage in honest signaling without relaying carotenoid consumption. No. Feather microstructures may be less effective than deeply saturated feathers for signaling overall fitness. Again, no. Scientists have yet to determine why tanagers have preference for mates with colorful appearances. Again, no. A male tanager's appearance may function as a dishonest signal of individual's overall fitness, right? So the appearance is not going to be the case. That is what they're saying very clearly, that generally serve to communicate what is known as an honest signal of birds' overall fitness to the potential mates. However, Allison have found out that males in several species of Tanager genus use microstructures in their feathers to manipulate light. So how they look like is not really to be believed, and how they are going about it, we don't understand this because the light has been manipulated by the feathers. We don't know what's actually going on. So the best answer for this question is going to be option D. Let's move on to question number 19. When writing The Other Black Girl 2021, novelist Zakiya Jalaliya Harris drew on her experiences working at a publishing office. The award winning book is Harris's first novel, but her writing blank. Now, because you're talking about the writing, it has to be singular. The subject over here, because it's singular, the related verb should also be singular, right? So, if you look for a singular verb, it cannot be were, it cannot be have, and it cannot be are. It has to be has been. So, that the best answer for this question has to be option C. Moving on. Question number 20, if you look at it, the Alvarez theory, developed in 1980 by physicist Luis Walter Alvarez and his geologist son Walter Alvarez, maintained that the secondary effects of an asteroid impact caused many dinosaurs and other animals to die out. It left unexplored the question of whether unrelated volcanic activity might have also contributed to the mass extinctions, right? So both the sentences over here are independent. If you take A, it will be a run-on. If you take B, again it will be a run-on. If you take D, it will be a comma splice error, right? So the only option that can be your answer over here, it is going to be option B, and you have to take option B as your answer over here because it has a comma and a connective both. Next question. In winter, the diets of Japanese macaws, also known as snow monkeys, are influenced more by food availability than by food preference. Although the monkeys prefer to eat vegetation and land dwelling invertebrates, those food sources may become unavailable because of extensive snow and ice cover, forcing the monkeys to hunt for marine animals in any stream that have not frozen over. That is what it is saying, that you have to understand this is not a subject, this is not a independent question sentence. So you have to use a gerund over here. The best answer over here is going to be option C. None of the other option is going to be making more sense, right? So the next question, question number 22, if you look at it, it says Lucia Michel of University of Chile observed that alkaline soils contain an insoluble form of iron that blueberry plants cannot absorb, thus inhibiting blueberry growth. If these plants were grown in alkaline soil alongside grasses that aid in iron solubilization, blank, Michel was determined to find out. Now this is a question. Could the blueberries thrive? Right? If you read it again, if these plants were grown in alkaline soil alongside grasses that aid in iron solubilization, could these blueberries thrive? So because this is a question, you have to use a question mark with it, and obviously you won't be taking it option A and B, and because it is a question, you have to start it with could, right? So would, could, might, whatever the helping verb you use, if you start with it, that is how it becomes a proper question. So option C obviously will also be eliminated, and the only apt option that has a question mark and a could at the start is option D, and that is why option D is going to be the best answer over here for your question. If you look at the next question, which is question number 23, it says, in his 1963 exposition of music, electronic television, Korean American artist Nam June Paik showed how television images could be manipulated to express an artist's perspective. Today, Paik blank considered the first video artist. Now, because you're talking about today, and because you're talking about something that is singular, so as per the rule of subject verb agreement, you are going to take a verb that is singular and present. So it will not be A, it cannot be B because one is future, one is past. It cannot be C because it is past. It's only option D that is talking about the present part. So this is a proper verb tense question, and option D is going to be your answer. Looking at the next question. The first computerized spreadsheet, Dan Bricklin's 𝐂𝐨𝐧𝐭𝐚𝐜, improved financial record keeping not only by providing users with an easy means of adjusting data in spreadsheets, but also by automatically updating all calculations that were dependent on these adjustments. Prior to 𝐂𝐨𝐽𝐾𝐜's release, changing a paper spreadsheet often required redoing the entire sheet by hand, a process that could take days. With choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English. So if you're talking about standards of conventional English, both the sentences are independent. If you want to join these two independent sentences, option A will be a run-on fragment, option B will be a comma splice error, option D is going to be a run-on fragment as well. It's only option C that can be your answer because it has a period towards the end of it. Now let's move on to the next question. This is question number 25. We are still going through the standard English convention questions. Now if you look at this question, it says, in order to prevent non-native fish species from moving freely between the Mediterranean and the Red Seas, marine biologist Bella Galil has proposed that a saline lock system can be installed along the Suez canals in Egypt's Great Bitter Lakes. The lock would increase the salinity of the lakes and blank a natural barrier of water most marine creatures would be unable to cross. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the convention of a standard English? Now, if you look at it, it says the lock would increase the salinity of the lakes and blank. So it is basically when you talk about the lock, it says increase because you have increase over here and it starts with a would. Then again, obviously, you will have an create because you have to take it similar. When you have tenses, you have to keep it parallel. When you have a list, you have to keep it parallel. Parallel means that you have both of them should be of the same form. Question number 26. Despite being cheap, versatile and easy to produce. When you say this, despite being cheap, versatile and easy to produce, whatever comes next, whatever is written after it should be the subject. Because whenever you have a modifier, the subject should follow it. Despite being cheap, versatile and easy to produce, whatever is easy to produce, cheap and versatile should come right after it. That is the noun modifier placement rule. So because you're talking about commercial plastics, it cannot be A, it cannot be B, and even it cannot be C. Because you have an apostrophe over here after commercial plastics, and that means you're talking about two associated problems in option C as well, which is as good as option B. So you'll be eliminating that as well, and the only answer that can be, the only option that can be your answer over here is going to be option D. Commercial plastics have two associated problems. So commercial plastics is the noun that is cheap, versatile and easy to produce, so it has to come right immediately after the modifier. Moving on to the next question. It says stomata, tiny pore structures in a leaf that absorb gases needed for plant growth, open when guard cells surrounding each pore swell with water. In a pivotal 2007 article, plant cell biologist Yuri Lee showed that lipid molecules called phosphatidylionisol phosphates are responsible for signaling guard cells to open stomata. Which choice completes the text so that it conforms to the conventions of standard English? Now, I've told you this before as well. In the previous test, we had a question that was about it. If you have a noun and you have a modifier after it, then you will use a comma before and after the modifier. But if you have a modifier before and you have a noun after it, what you will do is you will not use any commas before or after the noun. That means your answer cannot be A, your answer cannot be B, and your answer cannot obviously be D. The only option that can be your answer over here is option C, because biologist is a noun and it's a modifier, and Yuri Lee it's a noun, right? So when you have a noun after it, you don't need any commas. That is why option C will be the best answer over here. Moving on to the next question. Small flat structures called spatulae are found at the tips of the hair of a spider's leg. These spatulae temporarily bond with the atoms of whatever they touch. Blank spiders are able to cling to and climb almost any surface. So that becomes somewhat a reason for it. So that is why you cannot say, for instance, however, or similarly, this is as a result. So because this happens, spiders are able to do what they do. So this was again a question related to transitions. Moving on. The next question is question number 29. Again, this is a transition question. In November 1934, Amrita Sher Gill was living in what must have seemed like the ideal city for a young artist, Paris. She was studying firsthand the color-saturated style of France's modernist masters and beginning to make a name for herself as a painter. Sher Gill longed to return to her childhood home of India. Only there, she believed, could her art truly flourish. So she was doing everything well and she was thinking of something else. So that means you have to talk about something, a transition word that shows some sort of negation or opposition, right? So it cannot be therefore, indeed, and furthermore. It has to be still she was thinking about something else, even though she had all of it sorted out. So and again, there's one thing you should remember. If you have multiple transition words that mean the same, probably both of them have to be eliminated, because you cannot have more than one answer that means the same. So obviously you can eliminate both of them. So if you have therefore and furthermore, because both of them means the same and both of them cannot be your answer, that means both of them should be eliminated. That is how you can work about it. So let's move on. Question number 30. So if you move on to question number 30, it says, before California's 1911 election to prove a proposition granting women the right to vote, activists across the state sold tea to promote the cause of suffrage. In San Francisco, the Women's Suffrage Party sold equality tea at local fairs. In Los Angeles, activist Nancy Tootle Gregg, who ran one of the California's largest grocery stores, distributed votes for women tea, right? So what you have to see is what's happening in the first sentence. Exactly the same thing is happening in the second sentence as well. In the first sentence, it is talking about how they distributed the tea, and the second sentence is again talking about how they distributed the tea to people who are coming out to vote. So they are doing something that is similar, right? So it cannot be. It's not an example. It's not to conclude. There is no conclusion over there. It is not, in other words, because the situation is completely different. So it has to be similarly. The situation is different, but what's talked about in the situation, that is the same. So there is a similarity in that. That is why the best answer for this question is going to be option C. So again, this was a transition question. We'll move on to the final three questions, which are related to the rhetorical synthesis. Like I have mentioned before, the rhetorical synthesis is where you have some notes. You have to pick out the relevant information that is given to you in the caption or the subject, right? So if you look at it, it says, while researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. The Seikan Tunnel is a rail tunnel in Japan. It connects the island of Honshu and the island of Hokkaido. It is roughly 33 miles long. The Channel Tunnel is a rail tunnel in Europe. It connects Folkestone, England to Cockles, France. It's about 31 miles long. The student wants to compare the lengths of the two rail tunnels. So what the student wants to compare, it's just the length. So one is 31 and one is 33. So you just have to look for an option in which you have both of these lengths, right? And they're being compared. So if you look at it, option A is only talking about 30 miles. Option B is talking about both of them. It can be the answer. C is only talking about 33 miles, cannot be the answer. And option D is talking about none of them. So it cannot be the answer as well. So it's only option B that is talking about 33 miles long and 31 miles long. That is why option B will be your answer. This is the best answer that we can have over here. Moving on. Now let's look at this question. This is question number 32. It says, while researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. John Ching is a Los Angeles-based painter. He uses the term fauna to describe the plant-animal hybrids that he depicts in his surreal paintings. Fauna is a combination of the words flora and fauna. His painting Nectar depicts a parrot which leaves for feathers. His painting Primaveral depicts a snow leopard whose fur sprouts flowers. A student wants to provide an explanation and example of fauna. It's just the explanation and example of fauna. So the explanation is that it is an hybrid plant, and the explanation, after the explanation, it wants an example. So it has an example as well, depicts the nectar and all of that, right? So you have to look at the options. So when you move on to the options, if you look at the first option, it says the term fauna used by Los Angeles-based painter John Ching is a combination of the words flora and fauna. So this is not the answer. John Ching uses the term fauna, a combination of the word flora and fauna. This is the explanation to describe the subjects of surreal painting. Plant-animal hybrid such as a parrot with leaves and for feathers. So this is the example. So again, the best answer over here will be option B. Let's move on to the next question, which is supposedly the last question, and again related to rhetorical synthesis. While researching a topic, a student has taken the following notes. In the midst of the US Civil War, Susie Taylor escaped slavery and fled to Union Army-occupied St. Simons Islands of the Georgia coast. She began working for an all-black army regiment as a nurse and teacher. In 1902, she published a book about the time she spent with the regiment. Her book was the only Civil War memoir to be published by a black woman. It is still available to readers in print and online. The student wants to emphasize the uniqueness of Taylor's accomplishment, which choice most effectively uses relevant information from the notes to accomplish the goal. So what they're trying to do is the uniqueness of Taylor's accomplishment. So what is the uniqueness of Taylor's accomplishment? That is what you have to see and find in your option. So it was because she was the only black woman who was published this book, right? So it's not there in option A, B or C. It's only there in option D. Taylor was the only black woman to publish a Civil War memoir, right? So there was no other woman who did that. It's clearly written over here that her book was the only Civil War memoir to be published by a black woman, right? So this is written in the black, and you needed uniqueness. So this is a uniqueness as well, because this is something that was only done by her. That is why the best answer over here will be option D. Now again, like I mentioned in my previous video, you guys must be wondering that you have 33 questions over here in the test, while on the SAT we have 27 tests. Now because this is a linear test, we are discussing a linear test. That is why we have 33 questions over here. But when you will be solving your test on the blue book, you'll have 27 questions and you'll have to solve 27 questions over there. Over here, the purpose is to understand each and every type of question. So if you have a few more questions, that's not a problem. But over there, when you solve it on your blue book, you're gonna have 27 questions for each of the modules. So we'll be back with more videos. We'll be discussing more tests over here, hopefully, and we'll try to help you out as much as we can. If you have any problem with this, if you find trouble in any of the questions, you can contact us. You can comment below and you can mention your problem, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching this video. Subscribe, like our channel, follow us. Thank you so much.